9 seconds does not sound like a long time. Count it out right now if you want. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. In a normal conversation, 9 seconds of silence is barely noticeable. But on live television, in the middle of a high-stakes political exchange, with cameras rolling and a room full of people watching, 9 seconds of silence from one of the most talked-about political figures in the world is an eternity. It is the kind of silence that everyone in the room feels in their chest. The kind that makes producers in the control room sit forward in their chairs. The kind that tells every person watching at home that something just happened that was not supposed to happen. Donald Trump went silent for 9 full seconds after Jasmine Crockett delivered a fact check so precise, so thoroughly documented, and so impossible to immediately counter that even he, a man who has never been accused of being short on words, had nothing to say. What she said in the moments before that silence, and what it revealed about the claims he had just made, is what we are breaking down for you right now in complete detail. Do not go anywhere. And if you are new here, hit that like button and subscribe right now, because moments like this one are exactly what this channel is built for. Before we get into what Crockett said, and why it stopped Trump cold, you need to understand the environment this happened in and why it was set up in a way that should have favored him completely. Donald Trump is one of the most experienced figures in the history of American political media. Decades of television, decades of press conferences, decades of rallies, debates, interviews, and live broadcasts have given him a relationship with the camera that very few people on Earth can match. He knows how to perform. He knows how to dominate a room. He knows how to take a hostile question and redirect it, reframe it, absorb it, and turn it into something that serves his narrative instead of challenging it. He has done this in front of massive audiences under enormous pressure more times than most politicians do in an entire career. He also has a very specific technique when it comes to making claims in public. He speaks with total confidence. He does not hedge. He does not say probably or approximately or according to some sources. He states things as if they are simply true, as if any reasonable person would already know this, as if doubting it would be the strange position to take. That technique is powerful because confidence is contagious. When someone speaks with complete certainty, the instinct of most people in the room is to assume the certainty is earned. Questioning it feels rude, interrupting it feels aggressive, and most of the time in most settings the certainty just flows past unchallenged because the pace and the force of it don't leave room for a challenge to land. Jasmine Crockett makes room. That is her signature, not volume, not aggression, not matching energy with energy. She slows things down. She asks for specificity. She pulls the conversation out of the fast-moving current of assertion and confidence and into the slower, clearer water where facts either hold up or they do not. And once you are in that water, confidence without substance has nowhere to hide. The setting was a high-profile televised exchange, the kind of format where political figures from opposing sides are placed in direct conversation on consequential issues, and the audience at home gets to watch what happens. Trump had come in strong. He had made a series of sweeping claims in the opening portion of the exchange about economic performance, about policy outcomes, and about what he characterized as a record of results that spoke for itself. He was in full command of the room. His delivery was assured. His tone was that of someone who considers the argument already settled and is simply waiting for the other side to acknowledge it. Crockett had been listening carefully. She always listens carefully, because listening is where the preparation meets the moment. You can read everything before you walk into the room, and she had, but the specific opening you are waiting for only appears when the other person actually speaks. And Trump, in the first 10 minutes of the exchange, had given her exactly the opening she needed. He had made a very specific factual claim, not a broad assertion about values or vision or political philosophy, the kind of claim that is hard to pin down because it lives in the realm of opinion. A specific, verifiable, numerical claim about a measurable economic outcome during a specific period of time. He had cited the figure with the confidence he always brings. He had connected it to his broader argument, and then he had moved on the way you do when you're sure nobody in the room is going to stop you. Crockett stopped him. She did not interrupt. She waited until he had completed his point. She let him finish. And then she said in a voice that was completely level that she wanted to return to the specific figure he had just cited because she believed it required some examination. Trump looked at her with the expression he uses when he is deciding whether someone is worth engaging with directly. It is a particular look, assessing, slightly amused, not yet concerned. She told him where the figure he had cited actually came from, not where he thought it came from, not where it was being presented as coming from in certain media environments. where it actually originated. She named the original source. She described what that source had actually measured and over what period and using what methodology. And then she explained, in language that was clear enough for any viewer at home to follow, why the number he had taken from that source and the conclusion he had drawn from it were not the same thing. The source was real. The number existed, but it measured something different from what he had claimed it measured. The gap between what the data showed and what he had said the data showed was not a matter of interpretation. It was a matter of what the data actually contained. The room shifted, not dramatically, not with gasps or visible reactions from everyone at once. It shifted the way rooms shift when something true enters them unexpectedly. Quietly and all at once, Trump's expression changed. The slight amusement went first, then the assurance. What replaced them was something that people who have watched him for years almost never see. A pause that was not a performer's pause, not the deliberate beat before a punchline or a counterattack. An actual pause, the kind that happens when the brain is working through options and has not yet found one that feels solid. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds, people in the room were very still. 4 seconds, 5 seconds, the host did not jump in. Crockett did not jump in. Nobody jumped in. The silence was allowed to exist because everyone in that room understood that it was the most honest thing that had happened in the exchange so far. 6 seconds, 7 seconds, press cameras were completely still. Not moving, not adjusting angle, just recording. 8 seconds, 9 seconds, and then Trump spoke. What he said was not a counter-argument. It was not a correction of her correction. It was not a defense of the figure he had cited or an explanation of why her reading of the source was wrong. It was a reframe. He shifted to a different aspect of the broader argument, one where he was on firmer ground, and he moved there with enough energy that a casual viewer might not have noticed the pivot. But it was a pivot, and everyone in that room knew it. And the 9 seconds that preceded it had already told the story that the pivot was trying to avoid. Crockett noted the pivot calmly. She said she understood he wanted to address other aspects of the issue, and she was glad to do that too. But she asked, for the record, whether he was withdrawing the specific figure he had cited or standing by it, because the committee and the public deserved clarity on that specific point. Trump said the overall picture was what mattered. Crockett said she agreed that the overall picture mattered, which was exactly why the accuracy of the specific figures used to paint that picture also mattered. The exchange ended there on that specific point, but it did not end, because that 9-second silence and the fact check that produced it were already living in the world in a way that nothing either of them said afterward could change. To appreciate the full significance of what Crockett did in that moment, you have to understand something about how political misinformation actually works at the highest levels. It does not usually operate through outright fabrication. The most durable form of misleading information in political discourse is the real number used to support a claim it does not actually support. The source exists. The figure exists. But the connection being drawn between that figure and the conclusion being presented is not there in the original data. It has been added. And because the source is real, challenging it feels like you are challenging something solid, something documented, something that the person citing it can always point back to as evidence of their good faith. That technique depends on one thing. It depends on the person you are talking to either not having read the original source or not being able to communicate the discrepancy clearly and quickly enough to make it land in a fast-moving conversation. Jasmine Crockett had read the original source, and she could communicate the discrepancy with the kind of clarity and speed that comes from having understood it so thoroughly that explaining it is effortless. That is the specific skill that produced 9 seconds of silence from a man who has never been short on words. Not a rhetorical trick, not a gotcha. Just the actual data, explained clearly by someone who had done the reading. The response from the public was unlike almost anything that had come before it in recent political media. The clip spread faster than any comparable exchange in recent memory. Not just in political media circles, not just among people who follow congressional hearings or policy debates, but across every platform and every kind of audience. People who had never watched a political panel in their lives were watching this clip because someone had sent it to them and told them they needed to see it. What resonated most, according to the comments and conversations that exploded across social media, was not the political dimension of the moment. It was the 9 seconds themselves. People were timing it, counting it out loud, posting about what it felt like to watch it. The silence had become its own kind of content, its own kind of statement, because everyone watching understood instinctively what it meant. It meant the fact check had landed somewhere real. It meant the confidence that had filled the room moments before had run into something it could not move through. That silence traveled. It was referenced on morning news programs, in late-night segments, in political podcasts, in sports talk radio, in contexts that had nothing to do with the policy substance of the original exchange. Because the 9 seconds transcended the specific argument they emerged from. They said something about accountability and preparation, and what happens when someone refuses to let a false claim travel unchallenged in a room where it could do real damage. By the next morning, the specific source Crockett had named, the one Trump had cited inaccurately, had been contacted by multiple journalists. Representatives from that organization confirmed on the record that the figure in question had been taken from their research, but that the conclusion being drawn from it did not reflect what their data showed. That confirmation hit the news cycle like a second wave. Now it was not just Crockett's word against Trump's. It was the original source saying publicly that the data had been misrepresented. That changed the story considerably. What had started as a powerful television moment became a documented case of a specific factual inaccuracy being called out, investigated, and confirmed as an inaccuracy by the very source it had been attributed to. That is a different category of moment. That is a moment with institutional weight behind it. Political journalists who covered the exchange were unusually direct in their analysis. The fact check was accurate. The source confirmed it. The 9-second silence was now understood not as a dramatic pause, but as the visible response of someone who, in that specific moment, had no ground to stand on. And the pivot that followed was understood not as a rhetorical choice, but as the only available option when the ground disappears. Trump's team did not issue a specific response to the fact check. They issued broader statements about the overall exchange that emphasized what they characterized as the strong performance on policy vision and direction. The specific figure, the one that had produced 9 seconds of silence, was not addressed directly in any official communication. Crockett gave one brief interview after the exchange. She said she had simply looked at the source being cited, which is a basic thing anyone examining a claim should do, and found that it did not say what it was being presented as saying. She said she thought the public deserved to know that when it happened in a high-profile setting. She said she would keep doing it as long as it needed to be done. Then she went back to her office. Inside Washington, the reverberations from this moment were significant and lasting. Staffers on both sides of the political divide were talking about it. Political operatives who work on communications strategy were studying the exchange as a case study in what happens when a fact check is delivered with enough precision and composure that it cannot be deflected or outrun. The consensus among experienced professionals was consistent. She had been prepared. The preparation had been complete, and the moment had been executed in a way that left no room for the usual escapes. The confirmation from the original data source kept the story cycling through the news for nearly a week, which is an eternity in a media environment where most political moments expire within 24 hours. Each time a new outlet covered the confirmation, new audiences were introduced to the original exchange, new people watched the 9 seconds, and the silence did its work again. That is what real preparation produces, not just a good moment in the room. A moment that keeps working after the room has emptied. A moment that becomes a record, a reference point, a piece of documented political history that future conversations return to because it established something true that had not been clearly established before. 9 seconds of silence in a room full of cameras and microphones. That is what it looks like when preparation meets power and preparation wins. Donald Trump has been in rooms like that hundreds of times. He has faced challengers, critics, investigators, and opponents of every kind. He has walked out ahead most of the time. But that afternoon in that exchange, he met someone who had done the reading, all of it. And the 9 seconds that followed are now part of the record in a way that nothing said before or after them can erase. Washington felt it, the country felt it, and the people who needed to be paying attention were paying attention. This story is not finished. The policy questions at its center are still being debated. The data source whose findings were confirmed to have been misrepresented is now being cited in new reporting on related claims. And Jasmine Crockett has not said everything she has to say. But those 9 seconds already said something that does not need any more words. If this video gave you something real today, take 1 second right now and hit that like button. Share this with someone who needs to see it because this kind of moment deserves the widest possible audience. And if you are not subscribed yet, subscribe right now and hit the bell so you are notified the moment our next video drops. Because this story keeps moving and this channel will be right here every step of the way. Do not miss what comes next.